Taidy is a little girl who doesn't ask, "Why aren't we rich like them?" but asks, "Why do we spend more than we have?" Her little pink ledger has clear dividing lines. One side is labeled necessary, the other side is labeled wants. Taidy: "If we count carefully, we won't forget where the money went." Mother: "You're a strange child." Mom chuckled softly, not because her daughter's question sounded funny, but because it was too direct. When you grow up, you'll realize that most adults don't dare write these two words separately. Because it's difficult, Mom? The words necessary and want, as we grow up, are often written together, making it impossible to distinguish from what's worth paying for and what's just a momentary lapse of judgment. In the same community market, the adults were arguing about a big issue: the election for a new market president. The noise was deafening. They were competing to make promises, but no one was willing to show their bank statements. One adult: "If I become market president, everything will be better." Another: "I promise I'll give even more." Taidy sat listening under a stall. She didn't understand the word policy, but she understood the word who's paying. And that was the day the 8-year-old girl began to listen to the adults with questions the adults were reluctant to answer. Brother Kong, the most popular candidate. He doesn't talk about structure. He doesn't talk about budget. He says just one sentence, but it works immediately. A promise that needs no explanation is often easier to hear than the truth. Brother Kong: "Anyone hungry? I'll treat you." The kids: "Yay!" Candy, snacks, and soda are handed out every evening. Children laugh, adults smile. One adult: "He's so kind." Another: "He's truly connecting with the people." The sweetness never asks, "Who's paying?" It just makes everyone forget when they have to pay. Taidy received the candy. She asked softly, "Brother, whose money is this for?" Brother Kong laughed. "Future money." The 8-year-old's question wasn't loud, but it made someone stop and think. That night, Taidy went home. She opened her pink ledger. She wrote, "Received 1 free candy," but left the space for price blank. Because some things aren't yet valued in money, but rather as burdens in the future. After the giveaway, the market started to change, not because of the economy, but because of habit. Having gotten things for free, paying a small extra amount no longer seems like much, even though it never existed before. Vendor: "Just a small maintenance fee." Customer: "Oh, it wasn't like this before." New fees pop up. Maintenance fees, renovation fees, collaboration fees. One adult says, "It's all for the future." Another: "Be patient, it'll get better." The adult grumbles, but still nods. The phrase "for the future" becomes a short explanation for long-term expenses that no one says will end. Taidy opened the bank statement. The numbers were getting longer, even though she hadn't bought anything new. Taidy: "Does the future always have to be more expensive than the present?" Father. He didn't answer the question, not because he didn't love her, but because some questions even adults are afraid to answer directly. And that was the first time Taidy began to understand that some debts didn't start with borrowing, but with acceptance without asking for clarification. The phrase "helping each other" has become a popular term in the market. It sounds heartwarming, like everyone is standing on the same side. But no one has clearly defined how to help and who to exclude. One morning, Taidy saw a small sign in front of the meeting room: "Seats are limited, allocated on a case-by-case basis." Taidy asked his friend, "What does case-by-basement mean?" Friend: "Well, knowing people or having a kind heart." That evening, Taidy picked up the snacks she had received. She walked over to the event organizer. "I'd like to sit in front of the stage." The organizer, "Is there anything you can help with?" The organizer asked without looking at her. The question wasn't spoken aloud, but it was understood. She placed the snacks down. No one said thank you. Only her name was immediately written down on the paper. "That's strange. I got a seat, but it feels like I lost something." That night, Taidy opened her ledger. She wrote, "Paid for, 1 snack, received, a seat." Then she stopped writing, before adding a small line at the very bottom. She didn't know what else she had lost, because gratuities never had receipts, and sometimes the true price wasn't even written in the ledger. Election day. The market was bustling like a festival. Music, laughter, and repeated chants of "This is democracy." But some words were spoken aloud without explanation. One adult, "It's so lively today." Another, "This is democracy." The child stood outside the booth, a silent audience. Taidy saw some adults taking items before going in. No one stopped them. No one asked. She asked the supervising teacher, "Teacher, if we choose based on the item, is that still considered choosing?" The teacher sighed. "It's more complicated than that." She continued, her voice still lacking the subtlety to be indirect. "Is it complicated because adults make it complicated, or because they don't want children to understand?" The teacher sighed again and chose silence. The result was out. Brother Kong won. Loud applause. People, "He won!" Taidy silence. But Taidy's mind was completely silent. On that day, she finally understood that politics doesn't need to be rigged. Just making some people powerless to question is enough. And that was the turning point, where the 8-year-old girl began to see the world differently ever after. 1 month after the election, the first market meeting began. Brother Kong stood on stage. He used powerful words: a shared burden, for the future, everyone benefits. Simple words, but no one asked him to explain further. Brother Kong: "This is a shared burden for everyone's future." An older person: "That sounds necessary." Then the numbers were written on the board. Campaign debt, event debt, debt from giveaways. Brother Kong said, "We'll average it out." Some adults said, "Average? How much?" Some adults started calculating, and their faces turned pale because the word average never meant light for those who didn't choose to give away money. Taidy sat in the back row, but she calculated faster than everyone else. She whispered to her mother, "The price of the candy I ate goes up every month." "That's interesting." "Interest on what?" "On your insatiable greed." She understood, on a day when adults were beginning to get confused, that some debts aren't caused by numbers, but by not thinking before taking on an obligation. And some accounts on it that nobody opened them, but nobody wanted to open them.
Taidy didn't go to the meeting again. She chose to set up a small table next to a drink stall in the market. A handwritten sign in a child's handwriting held a question that was anything but small. Free accounting lessons for children and adults who are still confused. Free accounting lessons. Anyone with questions can come and sit down. The children sit down, and the adults stood and listened. Taidy is drawing 2 panels, simple words, but many adults haven't seen them separated for a long time. Want, necessary. Taidy, this panel is want, this panel is necessary. Child, I know. If it's not significant, can we have candy? Children, yes! Can we survive if there's no news being distributed? Some adults fell silent. That's it. The answer they wanted was very loud. And we chose this because of the candy. When will the candy stop? There was no answer, but many people started opening their bank accounts again. Because some questions will have no answer, require courage. Look at the numbers in front of you. The market didn't change immediately. Giveaways still existed. Promises were still being made. But something started to change. A child saying, "I don't need it, thank you." An adult saying, "May I ask, do I have to pay anything extra?" Some children started refusing. Some adults started asking. The change didn't start with shouting, but with the words, "Let me think about it first." Taidy has grown up, but the old pink ledger is still here. This one's still usable. The last page is still blank, not because she doesn't know what to write, but because society hasn't finished writing this story yet. As long as humans remain confused between just right and satisfaction, debt will not disappear. It will only change its name and wait for the next generation to take over. This story, therefore, doesn't end at the market or at Taidy, but it ends every time someone stops before accepting and asks themselves, is this just right? Taidy, if it's not right, do we really need to accept it? If we don't borrow, why do we have to pay it back? When there's a lack of moderation, whether in power, giving, or choice, humans become perpetually indebted, even if they never intended to borrow, because some debts don't begin with asking, but with receiving without thinking. This story, therefore, doesn't end with an answer, but with a question. A question not found in an account book, not on a stage, and not in a novel, but in the life of the reader. Every time someone offers you something, you have to decide, is this just right?